With Liquor Barn, you can shop your favorite bourbon, that perfect bottle of wine, or discover something new. To place an order for pickup or delivery, download the Liquor Barn app, visit liquorbarn.com, or call your nearest Liquor Barn location. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our email list for all the latest news on products, promotions, and events. Liquor Barn, where Kentuckians go to celebrate life. Cheers!
Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark. With me, as always, live in the Bourbon Life Studios, otherwise known, of course, as my basement, is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing tonight, man?
Mark, I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. Still got the toboggan going, or I'm sorry, the beanie going. It's, we're in spring, Matt. You got to drop that sometime, right?
Well, someone's got to give Kentucky the memo that it's actually springtime.
It's supposed to snow this weekend, right?
I know, and we had snow on April Fool's Day. I thought it was just a terrible joke, but sure enough, we had snow then. We're supposed to get more snow. So look, until it is confirmed as actually springtime, I'm gonna keep wearing the beanie.
Keep wearing the beanie. You know, I'm old enough to remember, Matt. I was in college when it actually snowed on Derby Day. We were having a Derby party off campus at a house, and it actually snowed on Derby Day. So that was pretty miserable. So I'm hoping we don't have to deal with that again this year. But man, the rate we're going, every weekend we're getting 30 degrees and snow. So hopefully we can get past that, man. So I'm excited about the show tonight. You know, I'm looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while. So I do need to thank all of our sponsors, of course. So we appreciate everything that they do for us. And with that said, Matt, you want to tell everybody who we have with us?
Absolutely. Let's get to it. We have the CEO and co-founder and also the whiskey director of Blue Run Spirits, Mike Montgomery and Shaylyn Gammon. Everyone, welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Thank you for
Thanks
having us.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you guys on here. Like I said, I've been looking forward to this show for quite a while, so I'm glad we had it on the books, and just glad that you guys were able to join us. I know, you know, this day and age, it's kind of cool that we were talking about that off camera before, that you can be pretty much wherever and still get together and hang out. You don't have to be in person all the time. So that makes it really easy. But I know you have busy schedules. So we appreciate you all taking the time to join us tonight, to spend some time with us and spend some time with our listeners to talk about Blue Run. So really excited about this. So first round, we've got poured up. This is, it's Reflection 1. That's all I'm going to say. So I'll let one of you kind of tell everybody listening about what that is.
Well, I guess I'll start. So I can talk about the non-technical side of it.
Okay.
And Shaylyn can handle the technical side of it. So Reflection 1 is a product of was something that we really developed in 2020. Around the time when the pandemic was just starting to take root. We were all locked inside of our homes, and the sky was falling. At the time, there was a fairly serious medical condition within my household that we were dealing with, and one of my co-founders also was had a fairly similar medical issue that was happening in his household. And what we turned to was reflection. We found that this bourbon at this proof point was really kind of this magic elixir that could take us to this different place, this different mindset that for a moment removed some of the difficulty of life, removed some of the fear that was involved in what we were going through, and really just kind of took us to more of a happy place. it's certainly more of an accessible bourbon in terms of the Blue Run lineup. Not only in terms of price, but in terms of I think the flavor profile it's going to appeal to the nerds, the bourbon nerds. I think it's also going to appeal to the people who are just bourbon curious. The people who are just getting started, who are looking for kind of a fruity floral nose, which, by the way, is the thing that captivates me significantly. Is just the nose on it is kind of a classic Jim Rutledge nose. But it's really this is the bourbon that it removed me from a kind of a bad place in terms of kind of my outlook on life at that very moment, or it elevated the really happy times that we were going through. And the range of emotions that we all went through in 2020 were severe. There were a bunch of highs, there were a bunch of lows. But this is the bourbon that really kind of took me out of that sort of mindset and made the lows high and the highs even higher.
Very nice. Yeah, I like that. I had not heard that story, so that's very cool. So reflection, it has a lot of meaning to it, to you personally, but I think like you said, to all of us out here who, we've all gone through the pandemic. Some of us, like myself, actually had COVID at one point, and it does. There's no doubt it makes you reflect on things in life. So very cool. I really appreciate that story. Thanks for sharing that. So now jumping into
absolutely, and
technical.
Shaylyn can tell you a little bit more. Yeah, the technical side. She's the pro. And by the way, I just want to say, for your listeners who haven't had a chance to get to know Shaylyn, she's a star. She knows things that I just wish that I could know, and I never will. It's a real pleasure to not only have her on our team, but the ability to introduce her to the Bourbon Life team is even more exciting.
Great. Well, thank you. We appreciate that. We appreciate you both being here. I'm sorry, Shaylyn. Go.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. That was a very nice introduction. And I can't top his story. It's an amazing story. It tells you more about the liquid than anything else. But it is just a couple things that, Blue Run came onto the scene with some really like high or older aged products and really made a splash. And now we're, as I come on board and we kind of decide what direction we want to go in with the liquid in general, one of the things we're doing is establishing some flagships, and Reflection is going to be more of a flagship. Okay. At least that's been, kind of the direction up till now. So it is, as he said, very approachable, sippable. It's 95 proof. It is a high rye mash bourbon. And yeah, I agree. I think it has a really powerful nose, and it hits you strong up front, and it doesn't entirely linger all the way through, but that's sometimes that's what you want. And I personally think it sips a bit hotter than 95. Like, it's got a higher ethanol.
Right.
It feels hotter than 95, which means it would stand up in a cocktail. But yeah, it's just an overall really good bourbon. Jim Rutledge. You can't go wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No doubt about it. We can talk about Jim, more
sure.
as we get into the show for sure. So Matt, what do you pick up on this in terms of the nose, man?
At first, I got a whole lot of the corn, a whole lot of really nice grain, and I was hearing that it's only 55% corn was kind of surprising. But
Matt, I think my note's wrong.
Okay, never mind.
I'm not sure. Is it 65% corn, or can you say
65?
It's okay.
65.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Well, still kind of a lower corn, higher rye here. But I pick up a lot of frosted flakes, get like sweet corn, little frosting coming through with it. Ooh. And then Mike, you were saying that there's a lot of floral, a lot of fruit with it. I get a ton of green apple. This to me is just like screaming green apple, and then there's like some other like floral notes, kind of like some chamomile, maybe some sort of like a nice floral tea with it as well. But
I like that.
Frosted Flakes and green apple on this one.
Yeah, man. I definitely, when you said Frosted
Boy,
Flakes,
there's nothing I love more than a
sweetness is
bowl
coming
of
through.
Frosted Flakes.
No doubt.
Oh, I agree with that.
I mean, if I
100%.
could sit down to a bowl of Frosted Flakes and some reflection, sign me up.
Oh yeah, I think that sounds like a great plan. Next time we get the show together again, we can do that. We'll just have everybody will have some Frosted Flakes.
Yeah.
And some reflection. I think that would be
together mixed.
Yeah, just mix it together. There you go. That'll work. But yeah, man, I agree with you, man. That's no milk. That's right. We're just going to top it with reflection. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So let's talk about you guys. Let's talk about who you are. So whoever wants to go first, if you would, just share about yourself. Talk about your past, your where you came from, your past experience, and how in the world you got into the wonderful world of whiskey.
Well, Shaylyn should go first.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I'm sure you get so many interesting stories on how people get into whiskey. Who sets out to do it? I mean, I think few of us, we aspire to it, but to find yourself in the world is an honor, really. I went to UK, as I mentioned, before we started talking, like officially, but
Go Cats.
Go Cats. I was undecided, but knew I wanted to maybe do something math science just because I was entering school during the recession, and knew I would surely have a job if I went that route, right? Anyway, I've always loved food and drink and flavor. And then I found out about this degree called food science, and my world opened up because it was unique. It was small. I was one of two in my graduating class. Very small degree. But the world that like didn't really even know existed opened up in front of me, and that was research and development. So basically, I worked about a year and a half doing a research and development job for big food companies, and then I got the opportunity to go to Campari, a large spirits company, and work on a ton of different alcohol types. I was there for 8 years. So I worked for the North American portfolio, and that included all different spirit types. And that's where I really got exposed to bourbon, and I got to work with the Russells. And I really, I was doing all the development work in the lab, mixing, picking barrels, coming up with all these new products coming out of Wild Turkey and out of Russell's Reserve. And saw a lot of success, and it was really encouraging to know, like, okay, I think this is the path that I'm supposed to be on. So, I'm a scientist, but I also think there's a ton of creativity and artistry that goes into blending and creating flavors. And really just this, I haven't mentioned this yet, but I have a, crazy sensitive palate that at times can be a nuisance, but here I found this niche that my palate served me well. So,
yeah.
Of course, now the new and exciting part of my career is I'm with Blue Run, and I've been on board just 2 months, but man, it's been such a fun ride so far, and they're giving me a lot of room to roam. And as Mike likes to say, he's giving me tools for my sandbox, and we're just figuring it out together. So
very, very cool. So now you did work with Wild Turkey, a lot of work there. Now you also played a role, pretty big role, I think, with Russell's Reserve 13. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did that. Yeah. Yep, that was one of the final projects I did before I left. And of course, I got this great, amazing review by Fred Minnick. So
right.
Very cool way to leave the company on a high.
I mean, it's great. I mean, you go to work and you love if you're passionate about what you do, success is going to follow. It does, there's no question about it.
Mm-hmm.
But to have, someone of Fred's caliber to take a whiskey that you're an integral part of, I mean, it has to make you feel like, I'm doing something really right here.
Totally. Yeah. And I agree with that. Like I definitely try to approach things from, not thinking about like how necessarily it'll be received. Like it's more of artistry is kind of a personal thing, like, so if as long as you're staying true to yourself, your hope is that others will see that and receive that well,
Sure.
And I think that's important.
Sure. So now your official title is whiskey director, is that right?
Yes.
So can you kind of just tell us what that entails, what that means in terms of what you're going to be doing?
Yeah. Well, excitingly, I was the first official hire for Blue Run, and first female hire. So kudos to Blue Run.
Yeah, very nice.
But yeah, I basically, I'm coming in with this industry experience and trying to figure out like, okay, how does my experience apply? What do we want to do with our inventory that we have? We're obviously distilling amazing liquid with Jim Rutledge right now. And what direction do we want to go in for the liquid? We've had the success so far. They've built this amazing brand, and how do we just continue to shape that? And my role is everything that has to do with the liquid. So innovation and some of these flagship products, trying to understand how all that's going to shake out. But at the end of the day, like I do want to be creative, and I want to do things that no one's seen before, that fit the brand. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, that's very cool. So congratulations to you. Congratulations, Mike, on what sounds like quite an exceptional hire. So Mike, let's turn focus over to you. Can you tell us about who you are and what your background is, and then how it is that you got into the world of whiskey?
Sure, I can. But first, I want to just dwell on Shaylyn for a moment. Shaylyn's product was number one on Fred Minnick's list. Our product was 51st on Fred Minnick's list. We were thrilled to be on his list. But those 50 spots of difference are what we're looking to make up, right? There's still so much room for us to grow and innovate and tantalize and do all the things that we really want to do, that Shaylyn's just going to be such a critical component of. She's going to elevate our game significantly. I do want to point out that she is a new mother. When my wife was a new mother, she got laid off. So we're trying to send a message here that just because a woman has a child doesn't mean that should be the end of line. This should be the beginning of something. And so, and it is the beginning of something. There's so much room to run, so much growth that can be achieved. And we're really lucky to have her. As for me,
I come from a very non-traditional background in terms of somebody who ended up being the CEO of a bourbon company. I was an econ major from the Pacific Northwest. I spent some time in Olympic sports, and ultimately ended up in politics in California. And being in the political world taught me a lot about people and messaging and what to do, and also what not to do. Right? I have this unique kind of background where I've dealt with some folks who have been recalled from office, who've been threatened with recall from office, spending time in politics and in political consulting taught me that it's not always that much fun to have clients. There must be a better application for the skills that I've accumulated along the way. Specifically, perhaps dealing with something that I enjoy, right? We live in this world that's so divisive. Politics is so divisive. It doesn't matter which side of the fence you sit on, or even if you're right in the middle. It's messy, and it's messier than it's ever been. And so I generally view what I bring to the table as bringing kind of a mindset of how to communicate with what we'll call the bourbon voters, and how to have best form relationships. We want to be like a member of Congress that's in office for 150 years. Like God, how long has that person been in office? Well, it's they've been in for 12 terms.
The proverbial Strom Thurmond of
we're going to be the proverbial Strom Thurmond minus some of the
of bourbon
political leanings, and scandals, but the whole point of this was originally that we wanted to do things differently. We wanted to kind of enter this industry in a way that could, from a kind of a viewpoint of modernization. This industry has been what it's been amazing. It's unbelievable. I don't want to detract from that at all. But when you look at any bar shelf, a lot of the bottles look alike. It's tan labels, it's brown writing and script, it's old mats or old marks, and and that's not necessarily the future. The juice is good, but there needs to be more of a complete package, right? We purposely didn't name our company after a Confederate general. We purposely didn't use the word ancient. We purposely didn't come up with this contrived story about the mash bill that we found in, our great-great-grandfather's attic, and we dusted it off, and once we dusted it off and we were able to use the decoder ring, we found that this mash bill was the greatest mash bill in the history of mash bills, and it was going to blow all the other mash bills out of the water forever, right? That's not who we are. We are slightly younger. We are more modern. We have a different look and feel. And now we have, going back to Shaylyn here, we have this person who's going to be able to innovate the hell out of this industry.
That's very cool. That's awesome. So Matt, let's jump in. Let's talk about the Reflection 1 in terms of the palate. What do you pick up on that?
Good amount of spice right up front. Nice peppermint, nice peppercorn as well. It's got some of those herbal qualities, picking up like a little bit of clover honey as well with it. Then the oak's coming through on the end. I'm not sure as to where this is with the age statement, but there's nice rounding out from some of the spiciness and some of the herbal qualities with some nice age and some mature oak flavor on the end.
Yeah. Did we say? Oh, cheers in myself.
Cheers.
Did we say? Yeah. Did we say how old this is? Did you have an age statement? There's not an age statement on this, is there?
It's not age stated.
Okay.
Yeah. It's 4 years old.
Okay.
I think you would agree that. I mean, I find, and I've heard others say this, that it does tend to have more flavor than you might expect from a 4-year-old.
Sure.
Which is just a bonus.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. And and Matt said on the nose you do get some of the grain, which is great. And I enjoy it. And the kind of that sweet aroma that comes through, like he said, frosted flakes on the palate, that you get that initial kick. And I think Shaylyn, you'd even said something about that in terms of the spiciness, the fact that it drinks higher than a 95 proofer. I think that's very true, at least to me, because I'm a high rye or a high proof kind of drinker, 120, 130-ish. And this one, it doesn't fall into that category, but it does drink higher than 95 in my opinion. Yeah. But it's very enjoyable. But I agree in terms of what you said, especially with a cocktail, that would stand out. That rye spiciness would shine through. Yeah, and it would stand up. It would stand up really, really well. So very, very nice. Retail on this one this one is already out. Is that right, or is it coming out?
It's out in Kentucky. We've released a very limited number in Kentucky so far.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. So, and I'm going to do something. This is our kind of a fun part of the show. We have a segment, we call it our off hours segment, and it's sponsored by one of our sponsors, Off Hours Bourbon. And what we like to do is ask our guests what they enjoy doing outside of the world of bourbon in their off hours. So if you don't care, Shaylyn, since you started about your background first, what do you like to do in your off hours?
I like to do a lot. I like to be outside. The older I get, the more I appreciate being outside, going for walks, hikes, all of that, just centering for me. I also, you can't tell by my room, but my childhood room, but I actually do interior decorating.
Oh, okay.
So I really enjoy that. It's one of my creative passions. So any and everything that has to do with design, I'm obsessed with it. But other than that, I love hanging out with my little son and my husband and family and friends. Very
cool. Very nice. Mike, what about you? How do you spend your off hours?
Well, I don't have any.
There you go. You're working, right?
Yeah, I'm working.
Like
but,
Elon Musk. You're like 21 hours a day.
Well, I mean, look, even when the work's done, I'm still, you guys can't see this, but I'm writing thank you notes constantly.
Gotcha.
So, but if I do have time, I love practicing Iyengar yoga. I like to exercise. I love watching sports. And I've got an 11-year-old daughter named Ella, who is along with my wife, of course, but Ella is the greatest thing to ever happen to me.
Nice.
And nice. So, I like to keep busy as much as possible.
Sure. That makes sense. That's great. Appreciate you all sharing that information with us. It, kind of gets a little personal, but we appreciate you doing that. It's always fun to look beyond the world of bourbon and see, that people actually have a life somewhat somewhere outside of Mike, even though it may be limited, that you do have that. So Matt, let's get some final thoughts on Reflection 1. What do you think about this one?
I like it. I think it strikes a really nice balance between some of the things we were talking about with being approachable to maybe someone who's not as well versed into bourbon or is looking to get into it and isn't going to be blown away by something with a super high proof point or very distinct characteristics as far as flavor, aroma, or finish seem to go. But there's definitely a whole lot more there than just an approachable bourbon for someone. I think the flavor and also the way it drinks, the little bit of heat that's added to it at 95 proof and 4 years old brings a whole lot of flavor to the table. There's a lot there. I really think it's a great offering and a good flagship.
Yep. I agree, Matt. 100%, man. Very, very well said. I can't really add much. As always, Matt, I can't really add much more to what you've already said. So, well, that's going to be the end of round one for us. So let's wrap this segment up. Let's get a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with more with Mike Montgomery and Shaylyn Gammon from Blue Run Spirits in just a minute. Spirits of French Lick crafts their spirits using only the finest agricultural product that has defined character, following their motto, respect the grain. They lead the way in representing the quality of the Hoosier artisan distilling process while paying tribute to its inseparable past. By implementing best practices from those early times, combined with modern touches, Spirits of French Lick has created a truly unique place in the industry. Spirits of French Lick products are distributed throughout Indiana, Kentucky, and Missouri, and can also be purchased online through Sealbox at sealbox.com. Visit spiritsofFrenchlick.com to learn more information and make sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky.
All right, everybody, welcome back for round session period, whatever you want to call it, number 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark. With me, as always, live tonight in the Bourbon Life Studios, is my good friend Matt. Matt, how you doing out there tonight?
Mark, I am nice and warm by your fireplace here. We were just talking about that off air, but I'm doing great. You got it nice and warmed up for me in your basement here, aka
I
the
take
Bourbon
care of
Life
you, man.
Studios.
Taking care of you, Matt.
What a guy. You really
I
do. But I'm excited because we're back for round session period, whatever you want to call it, number 2. And we have Mike Montgomery, the CEO and co-founder, and also Shaylyn Gammon, the whiskey director of Blue Run Spirits. Mike, Shaylyn, welcome back for round and/or session number 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Good to be part of session 2.
Well, hey, we're happy you hung around. You know, sometimes we lose guests that'll just not. we haven't lost anybody yet, fortunately. So we appreciate you guys hanging out with us. So this round, I got something else poured up. If you guys want to talk about what we've got poured up, that'd be great.
Sure. So you have High Rye Batch 1 coming in at 111 proof. We had, I think we had put this together pre-Shaylyn, it's the first foray into kind of a staple product for us that you're going to be seeing more of along the way. But we're proud of where it started. I think the way that we talked about this is that we really wanted people to see the progression of High Rye as it continued to age and as it matured. And so interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. So this is 111 proof. This one is non-age stated as well. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. But now this one, the mash bill is on the bottle. 65 corn, 30% rye, 5% malted barley. So again, obviously it's the High Rye bourbon. So we're looking at 30% on this, which right up Matt's alley. He's got his nose in his glass over there. So I'm just going to jump over to him and just ask him what he picks up on this one.
Oh, right away I get a nice whiff of like graham cracker, pie crust, right on the nose. Kind of I think the baking spices are coming through for me a good bit. There's some cardamom, maybe like a little coriander as well. I'm kind of like picking up like savory, bright spices, peppercorn with it. But there's a sweetness, like there's like this old candy. It was called bit of honey or something like that. And it kind of has like a nose somewhat reminiscent of that, where it's like sweet and caramely, but there's also like a savory, like butterscotchy, or I guess I'm not remembering those as well as when I was eating them a bunch as a kid, but something about it reminds me of a bit of honey.
I know. I'm reminiscing from my childhood now, Matt. Now you said bit of honey, I'm just like thinking back to being a kid and having bit of honey, and would pull any feelings that you had in your teeth. It was so thick and
you just put some of that in there. It's like a mouth guard for your football game. Just one on each side.
Yeah, no doubt.
Dentists love it too.
Yeah. 4 out of 5 dentists recommend bit of honey.
Yeah, prescribe bit of honey for.
But Matt,
for job
I agree
security.
With you.
Yeah, exactly.
For job security, no doubt about that. But Matt, I agree with you on this. On the nose, it is good. I initially detected almost like a little bit of mintiness on that. As it's set in the glass now, it's dissipated. I'm not really picking that note up, and it's turned into that more, like you said, kind of a sweet caramelly honey type of aroma. I'm picking that up. I get that rye spiciness though that comes through as well, for sure. But it was really interesting because it was like, oh, there's a little bit of mint. And then within like 10 or 15 seconds, as it set in a glass, it kind of dissipated, and I lost it. But yeah, I really, the nose on this one is very, very good. I really enjoyed this one as well. So let's talk about the brand itself, Mike. You're co-founder of Blue Run. You talked a little bit earlier when we were talking about who you are and kind of came in from outside, but can you talk about what the process was? I mean, how was it that you went from doing what you were doing before in politics and everything else to be like, hey, guess what? I'm going to start a bourbon brand. That's a great idea. Let's do it.
Yeah, it's an unlikely story, really. I had spent the last number of years doing political consulting, largely for tech companies, and I was really kind of applying what I thought were good ideas to help businesses grow or overcome trouble or capitalize on opportunity. And I was generally disposable, add some value, the value is added, and then, kind of thanks, on to the next.
Right.
Sounds like my role on this podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say, Matt.
Yeah. You and I have more in common than
Yeah.
we think here, Mike.
Yeah, I know. So you want to start a bourbon company, Matt?
Oh man,
Do I ever?
I was gonna say,
Yes.
yeah, don't even tempt him. Don't even throw that out there, Mike.
Now's the time.
Sorry,
Now's the
but I
time.
interrupted. Mike. Back to
No,
it.
it's okay. I enjoy the banter. So, over the last number of years, I kept feeling this entrepreneurial itch and wondering if a lot of the ideas that kind of circulate in my brain could actually be applied to something of my own instead of someone else's. And I didn't know what shape or form that would take, but one of my co-conspirators, the type of person I could pick up the phone and call and say, I have a crazy idea, and he'd be all ears, is a guy named Jesse McKnight, one of my co-founders. And we would do that to each other. We'd call each other up and bounce these I've got a crazy idea sorts of ideas off of each other. One day Jesse actually called me and said, hey, I got a crazy idea, in his Kentucky accent that I can't pull off. And he thinks I talk funny, and I think he talks funny, and we probably both do. And he said, somebody wants to sell me some barrels of bourbon. What should we do? And my answer was, let's do nothing. Right. Because in my mind, it was somebody who had 2 or 3 or 4 barrels. It wasn't going to be enough for a business, but I've always been a bourbon fan. Well, not always, but ever since college, when I was drinking Beam White Label with Coke, and it just kind of it morphed. Luckily, I came to a point in my life where I could actually drink, different kinds of bourbon that perhaps I enjoyed a little bit more without a mixer. Sure. And so, being a bourbon drinker is one thing. Starting a bourbon company is an entirely different idea, experience, mental deficiency. I don't know what. And so, I asked Jesse how many barrels this person had, and he said, not many. I said, well, that's not a business, and, but I couldn't get it out of my head. It was just stuck. It was almost seared in there. Like, okay, if somebody has 5 barrels, is there somebody who has 500 or 5,000, right? Is there something that we can actually scale and not just be this, one-hit wonder that nobody's ever heard of? What's the opposite of a one-hit wonder? Or one-hit nothing or something. Right. And so we just kept doing due diligence on this, and we kept looking into kind of the opportunity, and it just kept taking form over time. And then one rainy day in Los Angeles, I was driving on Fairfax past a Supreme store. Matt, you're probably of the generation that knows Supreme, and it was kind of like one of those. The weather was like it is in Louisville today exactly. A little bit misty, a little bit cold. You got to have you got to have a beanie like Matt's wearing tonight to stay warm. Maybe some earmuffs if you're really cold.
In LA? So wait, what? Is that? It gets that cold out there? I didn't.
I mean, it can. It can. It was probably 55, Mark. It's
not 70.
Yeah. It was 72 degrees. It was miserable.
it was 76 and partly cloudy, and that's not livable.
Oh no.
And there must have been 300 to 500 people in line outside the Supreme store, and so I'm typically curious, and I got out of my car and started talking to people and said, what's going on here? And they said, well, it's Thursday. And so I'm like, well, great, what's Thursday mean, right? Well, Supreme does these product drops every Thursday, and people show up and line up, and they try to get their hands on everything they can, from a magic 8-ball that's branded Supreme to a pair of sneakers. And that's kind of what stuck in my head was, this is sneaker culture.
Yeah.
And is there a way to apply sneaker culture to bourbon, or what I like to call sneakerize the bourbon industry? Right? Because there are product drops that people will wait in line for. No different from, birthday bourbon.
Yeah.
Right?
Hey, Matt and I have done it numerous times. So
you do it numerous times. And so I kind of wanted to see if we could take that to the next level and apply that in a kind of a new, different, unique way. Again, not back to ancients and olds and Confederate generals and everything, but more of a feeling that we wanted to evoke a feeling that would captivate a larger, broader audience. We live in this massively diversifying, world. And when you look at bourbon, you wouldn't naturally think, oh, Shaylyn Gammon's a bourbon drinker. But she is. And there are a lot of people like her who are.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people, like me and like Matt and Mark, like you. We're all coming from different places, but we all have this one thing in common. And so, we wanted to be able to kind of widen the aperture of the bourbon consumer.
Sure.
And we didn't think that we could do that by going back to old and ancient and an old, grandfather smoking a cigar on a label. Again, nothing wrong with that. That just wasn't the vibe that we were trying to create.
Sure.
So I called Jesse and said, Dan, I've got this crazy idea based on your crazy idea. But if we start a bourbon company, and we do everything differently, or we attempt to do everything differently. And, to his credit, he said, okay, tell me more.
Nice.
The very next call I made was actually to this guy named Devin McKinney, who is one of our co-founders. He's the head of lifestyle design at Nike.
Okay.
And I asked him what he could do with a bottle of bourbon. And he's like, what do you mean? I can drink it,
I can drink it. I can
drink it. I love bourbon.
Drink it.
I said, no, but like, if you had a blank slate, blank canvas, what could you do? And he's like, let me play around with it. Let me see what I can do. He was really excited about it. But that was a critical component to this is,
Sure.
It really is it. And sorry, I'm going to interject a little bit of Rutledge wisdom here, which is the way the bottle looks will get people to buy their first. The way it tastes will get them to buy their second and third and 10th and 50th and 100th.
Right.
So it can look phenomenal, but if it doesn't taste good, you're done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we wanted the outside and the inside to match. We wanted the outside and the inside to be in harmony.
Sure. That makes sense. And, on the podcast, obviously people can't see the bottle, but I'm sure most of our listeners have seen the bottles. They're gorgeous. There's no other way to describe these. It's probably one of the prettiest, if not the prettiest. I shouldn't say pretty. it's one of the best looking bottles that's out there. There's no question, hands down. But you said Devin actually had designed this, came up with the design for you. So along those lines, when you're thinking, so you've got this idea in your head, you know, your buddy had said, yeah, we can buy barrels. And you're thinking, okay, 5, not enough. 500, maybe 5,000. That'd be really cool. So you kind of start, like, in your mind, you're obviously kind of moving some pieces that need to be moved on this chessboard. I mean, you know, you're kind of putting the pieces together. You're putting the players together, the people that can do things. At that point in time, I mean, did you have in your mind what your target demographic would be? Because you've referenced, you know, Shaylyn, obviously, you know, you said people might look at her and say, she doesn't look like a bourbon drinker, but she is. Matt, you know, is his generation, you know, doesn't maybe look like a bourbon drinker. Me, I'm an old dude. You think, oh, he's a bourbon drinker, you know, or a Scotch drinker. But when you set out to do this, did you have something in mind? Like, this is what I want to appeal to. This is what I want. This is what I want my target market to be.
We had a general idea that we wanted to the kind of the catch phrase or the pillars of what we were building were youth, aspiration, and inclusivity. So youth doesn't mean, you know, can we get underage drinkers?
Sure.
But youth meant, can we attempt to age down, or at least open up bourbon to a younger audience, you know, 21 plus.
Right.
And, you know, I'll tell you that we found that we found that we actually have been able to do that. And when you look at some of the data from our online sales, our strongest demographics are from the 24 to 45s. Okay. That's, you know, younger than me. And so that's been one of the things. But youth, aspiration, and inclusivity really kind of capture what we were trying to achieve.
And that makes sense. So it wasn't that you picked out a person or people in your mind and said, that's who we want. That's who we want. You had these pillars, these foundations, these ideals and that's really what drove your brand, the creation, the bottle, everything about it. I mean, really drove that to really fulfill those 3 fundamental ideas that you had.
Absolutely. And when you look at the bottle and you look at the butterfly is it's not an accident, right? We get at, you know, a butterfly is really the process there's a process of metamorphosis. There's change, right? And that's what we were trying to capture, is change. You know, we want to be new, we want to be different, we want to be unique, but we also know that there's this great world of people out there who are either, like I mentioned earlier, bourbon curious.
Right.
You know, maybe they haven't had a lot of bourbon, maybe they've had just a little bit, and there's an opportunity to say, this is interesting, this is approachable.
Sure. No, that makes perfect sense. And, you know, talking about these, well, Matt, tell you what, before I ask the next question, let's talk about the palate. What are you picking up on this one?
Sure deal. Right away, I got sort of like a creaminess to the palate, and it came across as like a seasoned cream. I used to work in a restaurant, and we had a seasoned cream that went with one of our dishes, and it was like a cream with nutmeg added in that was added on. And so I get kind of like the sweetness, the butteriness of the cream, and then also like a little bit of the richness and some of the unctuousness, I guess, for lack of a better descriptive term, from some nutmeg coming through with it. And I also picked up like hazelnut and a little bit of leather on that as well. And then oak. It's got a good amount of the oak is coming through. I think a lot of the barrel characteristics, some of the oak, the vanilla, not as much caramel on this one as I've had in the past. And I think the rye really does a good job of punching through some of that as well, with some spicy, bright flavors as well, kind of to balance out any lasting like tannic effects or anything from the oak.
Yeah, I mean, that's very well said. I love the spiciness of this one. It really just on the finish. that really lingers. You get it's a complex finish to me. The mouthfeel, like you said, Matt, very mouthfeeling, very warming, no question about that. A lot of nice flavors, the bourbon flavors that come through. That vanilla, not as much, like you said, the caramel stuff, as you mentioned before. But man, on the palate, the length on it, it just goes on and on and on, and it is really a complex finish, and that's what I really enjoy. And I'm just guessing that this is still pretty young, just from knowing the brand and knowing what we drank the first round. But I'm really impressed with the fact that, for what I think in terms of age, this probably is, how it's drinking. And this one is 111 proof, and it lets you know that it's 111 proof, which I really like very much.
That's for you, Mark. I know you like the higher proof, and you can have a handful of reflection pours and feel pretty darn good in the morning. You might want to be careful with the high rye.
Yeah, I'm going to pace myself because we've got another one to go. We got another one to go through, so I'm definitely going to pace myself. So, Shaylyn, we're talking about reflection, and you were talking about in terms of flagship. Mike, you'd mentioned that as well. So you're looking at these products and you're thinking in terms of your flagship, what you're creating. Now, when you all are going to start, these are batches. These aren't single barrel bottles. So as you move forward with each batch, you got Reflection 1. I'm assuming there'll be a Reflection 2, Reflection 3. Is that correct? I mean, is that kind of the thought process behind that? And then you're going to have the High Rye Batch 1. You're getting ready you've done the Batch 2. So with these batches and these different releases, are you going to be trying to go with that same profile? I mean, are you looking to get the same profile off of each batch, each release, or are you just going to take what you have and really just kind of let those releases kind of just develop as part of the process?
Sure. It's a great question. I think I can see how it'd be a little it'd be a question on people's minds. For me, my goal would be to create more of a consistent profile. We're going to have all these fun innovations. Like, that's a no-brainer. Like, that's what we were founded on. That's not to say that as working out some kinks as we get to that point, there might be some variation, but ultimately I'd love to get to the point where people can go pick up a bottle of Reflection, pick up a bottle of High Rye, they know exactly what they're going to get, or at least, the 75% of it will be familiar, right? And They'll know, like, oh, these are the notes that I've come to know and love, and this is what I'm looking for when I pick up this bottle. So we are working towards that. Okay. I think something really fun is we might have these various batches along the way that have nuanced differences between them. But yeah, I think every brand needs sort of that what makes it the brand,
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm. As Mike mentioned, the Jim Rutledge nose, like, that's not going anywhere. So that's certainly one of our kind of our hallmarks that's establishing a lot of our brand as it is. So High Rye and Reflection at this point in time, you should be able to see those in the future.
Okay.
But at the same time, you're going to be able to continue to be surprised by some, back to the idea of sneakerization. We're going to surprise you with some drops that you're not going to expect.
Shaylyn, he's putting the pressure on you right here live on the Bourbon Life Podcast.
It's happening right now.
Yeah.
You're close.
Yeah. No, as I said, I think the brand will always was founded on some fun innovations, and obviously that's my world.
Right.
So those won't cease for sure.
Yeah. Closing that gap from 51 to number 1, right?
That's my goal.
There you go. That's great. Well, Matt, final thoughts here on this batch 1 of the High Rye Bourbon. What do you think?
I'm liking it. I really enjoy it. I think it's a good step up, good progression from the Reflection Batch 1 that we had, not only in proof, but also in some different flavors that that come through in it as well. I'm excited to taste what we've got coming for our third round here.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I'm a big fan. I was really happy that I got to pick up this bottle. And if I remember, I think this was maybe around $90. Does that sound right to you guys, Mike? Does that
It's about 100?
Retail?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I bought this at Liquor Barn where Matt and I met. in Hamburg here in Lexington. So I picked the bottle up there last fall, and was happy to do it. Just happened to walk in and they were like, "Hey, did you know they've got?" I'm like, "Okay." So I was glad I got a bottle of it, and I've really enjoyed it. So so I'm a big fan of this one. Definitely, there's no question about it. So let's take a quick break, get a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with more with Mike and Shaylyn from Blue Run Spirits in just a minute.
Three Chords line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The Three Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they call Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.threechordbourbon.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final round of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my good friend, Matt. Matt, thanks for sticking around, man. I really appreciate you hanging in there.
Hey, Mark, I wouldn't leave. I wouldn't leave you.
Oh, thanks,
especially not before round 3.
Yeah, that's good. I would not do very well on my own. I just
someone's got to watch after the show. I mean, you've got the first 2 rounds under control, but I don't know how heavy you're pouring yourself in there. So that's why
you know what? Round 2 was a heavy pour, but look, I left it sitting what I didn't drink. So I'm pacing myself because I knew we're going for another high proofer here, Matt. So
that's right.
I'm pacing myself. Well, tell everybody who we have with us.
That's right. We've got high proof whiskey, and we have high company too here with Mike Montgomery, the CEO and co-founder, and Shaylyn Gammon, the whiskey director of Blue Run Spirits. Welcome back. And in the last round, we had the High Rye Bourbon Batch 1. What is it that we have poured up here for the third and final round?
Go ahead, Shaylyn.
Okay. Yeah, so this is High Rye Batch number 2. So I don't know the exact amount of time in between the productions. Do you know, Mike? About a year?
Yeah, about that.
Like a year? Okay. So yeah, I was brand new with the company, and I got to see the dumping and the bottling of the batch number 2. So that was exciting. That was like my first few weeks with the company. But overall, yes, should be quite similar. Obviously, you'll see some differences. I think that's what makes it exciting. Just from, the various differences that emerge when you're aging whiskey. As you guys know, you can have 2 identical barrels full of distillate, but depending on where they are in the warehouse,
sure,
the conditions around the warehouse, there's so many aspects that go into really what happens during that aging, and then ultimately when the barrels are merged together at the end. So I'd love to hear any sort of similarities and differences you see on the nose.
You know what? We'll just throw it to Matt because that's what I always do.
Yeah, you put me right on the spot here.
Yeah. What do you think, Matt?
So I'll start off with just something I'm noticing as a difference.
Sure.
I get a little bit. Well, I shouldn't say a little. I get a lot more citrus on this. I'm picking up like orange or mandarin, something maybe not apricot, but something a little brighter right away on the nose, and the baking spices are coming through as well. I'm thinking, like, to me, it kind of is reminiscent of like a Christmas cloved orange type aroma right away. Then there's that kind of bit of honey that we were talking about, where there's like some sort of a dark sweetness, like a dark caramelized sugar or dark caramel, and sweetness with it, but also kind of something savory in that as well. And then this one has, I think, the oak is a little more subdued. It's almost like a little toastier, a little smokier, rather than just oaky, as I found. Yeah, found batch 1 was a little more oaky, a little leathery, and I'm kind of enjoying that. I'm not picking up as much of that leather. This like has more bright, youthful, vibrant flavors on the nose.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Love
good.
that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. To me, it's funny because as soon as I smelled it, it was almost like a butterscotch toffee type of aroma on the nose. And Matt, we talked about that bit of honey, kind of the honey flavor aroma on batch 1. This one, batch 2, it's almost, I hate to use the word softer, but the aroma to me is just on the nose. It's sweeter, and it's in that like butterscotch toffee type of range. I do get the spiciness, Matt, like you said, not as much. I don't get that. You said oakiness. I can see that. But yeah, I mean, it's not, it is a different profile, which is kind of funny because it's the same. I mean, it's the same mash bill, right? And I'm guessing around the same age. Is that accurate? Yeah, and same proof.
A little more age. With a little more age.
Mm-hmm. I gotcha. Yeah. So, but yeah, very, very pleasant, very nice. I really like the nose on this one. It's almost very dessert like. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, that's a good descriptor, Mark. I'm picking up like more nougat on the nose with this one. Like definitely sweeter, more dessert notes.
So Matt, it's funny because you mentioned toastiness. So what in terms of like your barrels and things that you all are using for this, what type of barrels do you guys use for your maturation process?
So it depends. We use a lot of the industry calls it like a number 4
gotcha.
char level. That's actually not a standard term. I don't know. I think it's a misnomer. It's widely understood that it is. It's not quite, but a lot of people do use a number 4 when they're talking about a number 4. They're talking about the same thing, if that makes sense. So with that higher degree of char, a lot of times you do have a toast level or toast layer within the barrel, and then on top of that, they char the barrel to a degree that you go from like mocha caramel like notes to more of a campfire degree of char, and that of course imparts everything from flavors to the color. There's just so much that we know and love about like a number 4 char. So we use a lot of that. We do have some number 3s as well, various suppliers, so different degrees of, and that's really exciting to me because it's more tools in my toolbox to play with.
So you're not just using one Cooper then? I mean, you're getting barrels from different places. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I gotcha. That makes sense. So that's really
cool.
But some of these barrels,
Shaylyn's going for a char level 9 next, so look out for the number 9 char barrels from Shaylyn.
Yeah. You're going for that Old Forester 1910, like char level 6 or whatever. I mean, they said apparently they just incinerate that barrel to the point that it almost like won't hold together anymore, and that's what they finished their 1910 in. And it does have that. You talked about campfire smokiness. You get a lot of that with that 1910, very dessert like. So it was kind of when I smelled this, I was like, it's not quite the same, but I do get that kind of desserty. Not quite a campfire, but that same kind of reminiscent aromas. So when Matt was talking about the toast, it just made me think about the barrels. So that's wanted to ask you guys about this. So let's talk about the production. Everything we've had tonight, the Reflection 1, the Batch 1 High Rye, Batch 2 High Rye. I mean, this is your stuff. This is your product. Is that right?
Yeah, this was actually distilled by Jim at Castle and Key. And this is the beginning of the staple products from Blue Run. Okay, great. So,
I know everybody's going to be curious to know Jim Rutledge, anybody in the bourbon world, anybody that's a fan of bourbon knows that name, knows who Jim is, know his illustrious career, the things he's done. So can you just talk about how it is that a guy that was not in the bourbon industry, who decided, hey, I think I want to get into this. That's like a coup d'etat. I mean, you pulled off a big one right there. How'd you work that out? How'd that happen? Can you share that story?
It's kind of unfair, isn't it? Yeah. So, Jesse, I talked about Jesse earlier in the show. And Jesse's from Georgetown, Kentucky. He worked for a member of Congress as his state director for quite a long time in Kentucky, and is fairly well connected in the state politically. And we were able to set up a meeting with Jim. I remember it like it was yesterday. It's like Michael Jordan walked in into the room. But the great thing about Michael Jordan, the great thing about Jim Rutledge is that he doesn't think he's Michael Jordan, right?
Yeah.
He thinks he's just a regular person, and there's nothing special about him, but there's everything special about him. He's, take bourbon out of it for a moment. He's one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. He's a friend. He's kind. He's conscientious. He listens. He provides great feedback. So anyway, Jim walks into this conference room, sits down, and listens to our spiel. Hears all this stuff about design and marketing, and then, we had the audacity to say, hey, would you consider working with us? And he kind of paused for a moment, nodded his head a little bit, and he said, yeah, sure.
Wow.
I'll work with you guys. And, he said, I asked him a couple of years later, like, why on earth did you say yes? Right? Like, what was it? And he said, I just had a good feeling about you guys.
Wow.
That was it. So we really, we hit the jackpot. We got extremely lucky. We wouldn't be in this position had it not been for Jim Rutledge.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everybody that knows anything about bourbon, knows Jim, but, I find it interesting, and I just wonder from his, because, Jim's been in the business for a long 50 plus years. And you guys come along and you've got a different strategy. You've got a different technique. You've got a different appeal. You've got these pillars that you're going, we talked about those 3 pillars earlier. You talked about the fact that you don't want to be the typical standard, same old, here's the bottle with the fancy calligraphy on it and the story from, 5 generations back, etc. So I just wonder from Jim's perspective if there was just something, because you've got this guy who has been part of that industry. He's been in that. He has been part of that. If there was just something in him that just said, hey, you know what? This is something different. This is something new for me. Maybe just, see if it works out. I don't know if you've ever had that discussion with him or if he's ever said that or not, but as an older guy myself, I can see that.
Yeah, well, first of all, you're not an older guy. I like you like to bill yourself as one, but that's unfair. So we never really had the conversation with him specifically like that. From our perspective, we were looking to marry kind of old school with new school.
Sure.
Sure. You can't have the best quality liquid, without some connection to people like Jim or people like Shaylyn. None of this would have been possible without Jim. None of this will be possible without Shaylyn. And so it's just, I think maybe Jim was kind of interested in kind of a different perspective, right? He'd been doing the same thing for a very long time, very successfully, right? No one can argue or dispute the success of Four Roses. I won't even do that because I enjoy Four Roses myself. There's much like my career, I think sometimes people are just looking for something new. They're looking for something different. And, maybe Blue Run was that for Jim.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And Shaylyn, I just got to say, you worked for Campari, doing work with Wild Turkey. You work with Eddie Russell. I'm assuming you're probably around Jimmy Russell at some point as well. and now you're working with Jim Rutledge. I mean, there's not a whole lot of people out there who can say that they have had that type of mentorship or partnership or experience. So what's that been like for you?
I mean, beyond my wildest dreams, like to start my career in the alcohol world alongside the Russells, literally doing innovation alongside Eddie and Bruce and Joanne and, just the whole family like that, it's the real deal over there. And then of course, when I was talking to Blue Run and they mentioned like, oh, by the way, we work with Jim Rutledge, and you could learn from him about distilling, about not just distilling, but like the entire whiskey making process from another Hall of Famer, and of course that was super. That was just one of the reasons that I was so enamored with the brand, one of many. And my first few weeks, I got to spend some time with Jim, and then we have plans to just sit down, like I'm talking hours, and just walk through the whole process. I mean, he's so generous with his time, as Mike has said. Like, he's a wonderful person, and even his emails, he starts to just break down for me, like from the very start, what to look for from the grains all the way through. And it's a pinch me moment again.
Sure.
It's been amazing. So, and I know there's so much more to come, and I'm really excited. Yeah,
that's great. And so can you talk about where you're distilling, where you all are working now? Is that something you can share?
Yeah. We're distilling at Bardstown Bourbon Company.
Okay.
They have right now they have the capacity that we need. And, I mean, we're in there as often as we can. We'd be in there as much as they would let us, if we could be in there more. But Jim oversees every aspect of the process,
Okay.
The temperatures to the times, all of that, that's where the magic, that's where it's so amazing just to watch him in doing his art.
Right.
Essentially, and how he can speak to, when we do this, these flavors emerge, and this is why you do this, and I've done it this way, and this is how you optimize this flavor formation. It's that type of stuff that's like priceless. And a lot of that stuff, new age distillation is a lot heavier in the analytical aspect of it all.
Right.
So I think the juxtaposition, learning about that side by side with just like the knowledge that he has in his head, and more of the art type approach, like the artistry, is very fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, you can he's old school. He's one of the old school guys. You think of these guys like Jimmy Russell, and you think of him. These guys, Booker No, these old guys that have been in the industry, that were in the industry for a long time, that did things differently, than it is now. So I can see, that's got to just be, I can't imagine what it feels like to do that. So that's just very cool. So I'm glad I got to ask you that question. So Shaylyn, also, you were brought in as well, in part to work with a single barrel program. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we have so many things we want to do as a brand.
Okay.
Single barrel being one of them eventually. Absolutely.
Gotcha. So is that anything, because I know there are people out there that are probably like, hey, everybody loves single barrels, right? Everybody wants a single barrel. Everybody wants to do it. I think it's one
of the most requested things. I mean, among other things. Innovation in general, like, you only have so much, right? And then your time and energy has to go here, here, here. So it's coming, but right now my primary focus is understanding what we have, and I want to be able to have that strong foundation.
Sure.
With our flagships, with our LTOs, that type of thing, before we maybe get into single barrel. So we're still talking through that, figuring out the dates and stuff. But as a team, that's a team decision. That's not necessarily my decision. So
I gotcha. So now, when you started the brand, go ahead,
20, 30 people a day. When can we do barrel picks? And it's we're getting there. we are devising a plan. It's coming together. It may not be as fast as everybody wants it, but it's coming.
Gotcha. Yep. That's good to hear, because people are really into that. There's no question about it. Between stores and restaurants and brands and even the private Facebook groups and liquor, bourbon groups, people like even podcasts. Sometimes podcasts even get to pick their own single barrel, which is a lot of fun. So that's cool. I know our listeners would love to know the answer to that. So that's good to hear. I'm glad you guys are working on that one. Matt, let's talk about the palate on this one. What are you picking up on this?
I find the palate on this one to be a lot brighter.
Okay.
Lot like brighter citrus flavors. Picking up like some toasted coconut.
Okay.
Of the sweetness with it. Then there's also the good rye spice. The peppercorn is coming through. I get like some ginger from kind of that fresh heat that like fresh ground ginger might add to it as well. But then it has some of the similar flavors with the toastiness from the oak, a little bit of that that creamy flavor as well on it as well. Good. I think if I had to pick between the two, I think I prefer this one.
I was going to say, if I had to pick between the three, this is going to be my winner for the night. No doubt about it. And you said earlier, this one has been released. So batch 2 is out, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
So people.
How do you feel about the finish?
For me, it's a nice long finish. It's just like the batch 1 that had the very long finish on it. This one I think finishes long as well. To me, this is more kind of it's got that the sweetness that Matt had talked about, and that to me it lingers on the palate. And I know it's a dry whiskey, so there's no sugar, so you can't really say, oh, it's sweet. But it's just got that perception of sweetness combined. To me, it finishes with kind of a cinnamon type of finish, and that sweetness. It's reminiscent to me of like a cinnamon candy, almost like a Brock's cinnamon candy, something like that. A very, very nice finish. But again, I think it's very complex in terms of the fact that it goes back and forth between that sweetness, like the vanilla, the toasty flavors. Not quite the campfire, but we talked about on the nose, those flavors carry through to the finish as well. But with that cinnamon spiciness from the rye, absolutely, yeah. This is my favorite for the night right here, no doubt.
Love it.
Great. Let's see. Awards. Yeah, let's talk about awards. I was going to ask you about that earlier because you guys have done pretty well with your releases. So can you talk about that? What the success you've had? You're in high demand, man.
Yeah, it's crazy. We did not expect to win any awards, right? We were fresh out of the box, and we sent 3 products into the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. We thought that the only way that anyone won an award there was to pay for it, but we didn't have the money to pay for it. We didn't even know how to pay for it, right? And right, like if somebody wants to win an award, how do they do that? And so at the time we had limited supply, and to enter a contest, at least that one in San Francisco, you had to send 2 bottles. Well, 2 bottles was a lot to us. That is a lot of product, right? Sure. And so we submitted the bottles, the entry fee, and then we forgot about it, right? It's like out of sight, out of mind. And one day I got this call saying, hey, you guys won. Well, we won what? And what did we win? Well, steak knives. We won
an all expense paid trip to
yes, to nowhere. We submitted the 13.5-year single barrel, the 14-year, and golden rye. And the 13.5-year and the 14-year both won double gold best in category.
Wow.
And Golden Rye, which at the time we just had to send, in a jar because we didn't have it bottled yet, won a gold medal. And it was, it really did put us on the map in a way that we didn't expect. And it was nothing that we could have imagined. We didn't expect it. It was just really kind of out of left field for us. The timing was great. We're in the middle of this pandemic. Not many people were walking into liquor stores at the time. And so, it really did help shine a light on this new company that not a lot of people had heard of at the time. So we're really grateful for that opportunity. We're still in shock that happened. And, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So real quick, let's talk about the change, because you talked about the 13.5 to 14. Obviously those are source products. You've been around since, when did you start? Like 2020, is that right? 2019,
yep,
2020?
October of 2020.
Okay. So, but now the products that we're dealing with, that we're talking about tonight, these are your products, your make. So, has there been some concern? Can you talk about that? Because when you go from having products that are sourced, they're still your products. You're doing your work with them. You're doing what you need to do. You're blending them, mixing them together. Obviously, you did a great job because you've won double gold. So can you talk a little bit, I think, probably in terms of like challenges from going from that to going to your own new make products that you're putting out?
Sure. I'll start, and Shaylyn can probably chime in with much more wisdom than I bring to this conversation. But go back to another Rutledge quote. Jim likes to say, it doesn't matter how old a barrel is, it matters when it's ready. Now, I'm a sucker for age. I really can be. If you flash a 6 or an 8 or a 10 or a 13 or a 15 in front of me, I'm like, ooh, it's a shiny object. But the inevitability of who we are as a company and where we're at in our life cycle is that we were lucky enough to source some extra age barrels that were fantastic and that I think we blended really well. Yet we also have this access to these, maturing Rutledge barrels that even when we tasted them at 2 years old, they stood out. When I was talking to Dan from Bourbon Junkies the other day, and he said, this is the best 4-year distillate I've ever had. So those are the types of things that stand out in my mind that say we're making this transition. But the transition that I think that I want people to keep in mind is we're not always going to be putting out non-age stated product, because that clock is ticking, and time is being added to those barrels even as we speak. So pay attention to the trajectory, just like you and Matt did, Mark, this between batch 1 and batch 2. But if you can think ahead a little bit about how much you like batch 2, then I really want you to think, like, I can't wait to get my hands on batch 3 or batch 5 or reflection 4, or it's kind of there is constantly room to grow. There's room to innovate. And Shaylyn mentioned this earlier, we're adding toys to her sandbox every day that she can play with and blend and have so much fun with that she's going to invent things that we can't think of today that are going to blow your minds tomorrow.
That's a lot of pressure there, Shaylyn.
It's got a lot of confidence in me. I appreciate it.
Well,
I completely agree with. Thank you. I completely agree with what Mike said, and I think the days of like trying to not be completely transparent with the consumer, like the average consumer that knows and loves whiskey, they know just as much as we do, you know, like they study it, and it's like, so I just think it's always important to be transparent. And I think, you know, as you said, like people know that the original products were sourced, and like those were absolute gems. GEM, and it made such a splash. So perhaps we won't be able to, you know, make a splash in that way again for a while. But as Mike said, like we're going to put our hard work into the quality of the product. Everything we release, we want it to be stellar, no matter if it's for the age or the proof or these things. But like we want the liquid itself to be great, no matter what the proof is or the age. And people can get really caught up in, I mean, I saw it a lot at my previous job, you know, people would get really caught up in, oh, it has to be high proof and it has to be older. It's not necessarily always the magic formula, you know,
Right.
like if you take a bourbon and you taste it at different proofs, it might be optimal at something that you wouldn't necessarily suspect, you know? And same with age. More age does not automatically equal better. You know, it definitely reaches a point where it there's a point of no return. So I guess I'm saying that our focus is on putting out quality product. That might shift as far as like what the innovation looks like, but you can always guarantee that we'll put out quality product.
That sounds great. So let's get final thoughts on this one, because we're at the end of round 3. So let's get final thoughts on batch 2. What do you think, man?
I think it's been the star of the evening.
Yep, I agree, hands down. Not the other two were great, but this one is it's just kind of, to me, in a class by itself. It really is. It's exceptional. I've really enjoyed it, and definitely gonna have to find myself a bottle of batch 2 to go with my batch 1. No doubt about it. So looking towards the future, Shaylyn, obviously, you know, you're on board now. That's your role, looking towards the future, obviously. So can you talk a little bit about what that future looks like for Blue Run Spirits?
Sure. I mean, we've already touched on it.
Sure.
I'm still, you know, we're still figuring it out. That's kind of the exciting part. You can come in with all these ideas, but like then there's the reality of executing them and making them work. So that's where I'm at, right? I'm trying to make things happen. And the co-founders built such an amazing brand, and I just want to continue to help them do that, have the brand prosper. I do have, you know, everything from like blending. Mike knows this, you know, I just want to get in there and blend. I want things to age longer. If we're able to do that, of course, who doesn't want that? And I have some crazy ideas innovation wise, some a little bit more expected perhaps, but others that are a little more out there. So I can't say much beyond that, but know that, you know, tinkering away in my lab, and
you're in your sandbox playing with your toys, right?
Like, exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. Guaranteed. Mike, from your perspective, what's the future look like for Blue Run?
You know, I think the future is bright. You know, we've developed some real core sort of staple products that we hope will resonate with people, and you know, we're going to drop some Easter eggs along the way as well. You know, this is supposed to be fun, right? This isn't rocket science. This isn't brain surgery, right? We're supposed to have fun. We're supposed to aim toward delighting people and raising their curiosity and giving them opportunities for kind of an elevated experience. And I think that we continue to work on ways to provide those sorts of experiences that people are looking for, you know, while at the same time maintaining focus on the idea that we still want to have widen the aperture of bourbon drinkers out there. We want to maintain, you know, the core group, the people like Matt who can pick up, a faint hint of cardamom on the nose, and the people who have no idea what that is.
It's me. No, just kidding.
That's probably more like me than you, Mark. But I know what I like when I taste it, and
Right.
so far we've hit the mark. Every single release keeps me up at night. We're not just kind of absent-mindedly pushing product out the door. We live and breathe every single drop of liquid, because it's meaningful. This is meaningful to us. It's meaningful that we hopefully make people out there happy, and that's really the goal. And if we can continue that, then I'll be happy.
Sure. No, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. That's very, very cool to hear. So where can our listeners find your products and find out more about Blue Run itself?
Well, you can find us online at Blue Run Spirits on pretty much every platform. And you can find us in 15 states and Canada and St. Martin's, and online at sealbox.com.
That sounds great. So before we close it out, anything y'all want to add? Shaylyn, Mike?
I just want to say
for this opportunity to chat with you guys.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're lagging. Yeah. But thank you so much. And we'll have to do this again in person.
Yes.
Or at least I'll have to meet you guys since we're so close. And then
Sure.
Next time Mike's in town.
Yep.
Yeah. Had we known that I was going to be here at this very moment, we could have done that. But, I hope that one day I'll be able to meet a good friend, just like you did, Mark, at the liquor store, in Matt, who has a great palate also. And it's pretty awesome what you guys have built. And I'm my only disappointment is taken us almost 2 years to make this happen. Right. But here we are. And by the grace of God, it's not going to be another 2 years until we get to hang out.
That's exactly right. That's very well said, man. I appreciate that. And we will definitely make this happen again. Definitely before 2 years. No question about it, Mike.
Good.
Matt, final thoughts from you, man.
Oh, this has been such a great evening. Mike, Shaylyn, thank you for taking the time to sit down and chat with us and share everything that you all have been doing and that we will be doing over at Blue Run. I really appreciated the opportunity to try everything with you and hear about the philosophy behind the company and where you're planning to take it. And I think one of the things that really stuck out to me was when we were chatting about your single barrel program. And it's nice to hear that you're not putting the carriage before the horse here, that you're taking care of yourselves and worrying about getting your flagship products and getting your backbone really set in place before divvying out single barrels to everybody that seems to be jumping on the trend and the fad that really wants them. It would be really easy to just start giving out barrels, but I appreciate what you're doing. And I think it says a lot about the integrity and the vision and the goal that you have with the company, that you want to set your feet firmly on the ground first and then innovate and take things from there. So I appreciate that part especially, but thanks again for sharing what you've offered with us. And we're looking forward to everything from you all in the future.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. I couldn't say it better. Again, Matt just is so eloquent with his words, and is, it's like I just say ditto what Matt said. But no, I do really appreciate it, Mike, Shaylyn. It's so great to meet you all. Look forward to the opportunity to doing this in person with you both sometime very soon. Congratulations, Shaylyn, to you with the opportunity here. I'm excited for you. I'm excited to see what comes from Blue Run with your direction and input as well. Mike, congratulations to you as well for listening to that little voice in your head that just wouldn't go away. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people, they get that nudge and they put it back in the box in the back of their head and they leave it sealed up and they never really pursue it. So, kudos to you. I didn't want
to have that regret.
Yep. Completely.
I just didn't want to have that regret.
Yeah. I mean, very well said. It would be regret, and kudos to you for taking that risk and stepping forward and doing that, and hitting the home run. I mean, you guys, you've done a great job, Mike. So this has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it, and we will definitely do this again soon. So I'm going to wrap it up and thank all of our sponsors. Of course, we appreciate everything they do for us. All of our listeners, we appreciate you guys as well. If you want to reach out to us, please do so. You can find us on Instagram at The Bourbon Life, also on Facebook. Join our private Facebook group, The Bourbon Lifers. We'd love to have you as part of that. You can email us at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. Leave us a review if you feel so inclined. We'd really appreciate that on iTunes or whatever your podcasting platform happens to be. And with that said, I'm going to wrap it up, send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.
Whether it's rye, sour mash Tennessee whiskey, or bourbon, Davidson Reserve has something delicious to offer any whiskey lover's palate. Pick up a bottle of one of our award-winning Davidson Reserve whiskeys from your local retailer today. Visit www.davidsonreserve.com for more information. And cheers to drinking local.